Hi everyone, this is a special bonus feature about using symbols and making interesting endings. Now, I think many of you have already seen the PowerPoint slides or the Google slides which I've already shared around, but in case you want a bit more detailed explanation, actually listen to me to explain this, then stay tuned. So, one of the hardest things about making creative stories or making stories creative is using narrative techniques, and one of them is using symbols. I think when most people write stories, they tend to go straight to writing a story from start to finish, like a factual recount. So it's like, remember in primary school, you used to go on an excursion and then you wrote down, yesterday I went to the museum and I saw a fish and then I ate a sandwich and then I went home. That's a sort of writing which I think many of us are kind of stuck with. So when you're challenged to write something creatively, you're trying to go from factual information or writing, say, a dot point summary to writing something with flair, with engagement, with interesting hooks. And one of the things you can focus on is using symbols. So we looked at this the other lesson. And if you're watching this from a different class, hopefully this helps you as well. So the main feedback that we got last time was, how do you make effective use of symbols? And the additional question was, well, how do you make endings interesting? Okay, we're linking these two problems. One, your writing's too plain. Two, your endings are boring. So how do you solve these problems? So our learning goal is, of course, to understand how symbols are used effectively and how they can help narrative structure. So what are symbols? Symbols are items that can be deliberately inserted into a story for effect. And the key word is deliberately. Because you are writing this as a story, as a narrative, as a creative piece, you choose what goes in. And I believe it's very important to emphasize this. As the author, you get to choose. Don't just include things for the sake of including things. And because this is your story, whether fictional or not, you can choose or you can select what you want to focus on. And the example of this is, let's say we write a story where we go out and have lunch. Now, there may be a particular thing which has a symbolic value. Let's say we're going to eat lunch and we order curry rice from a Japanese restaurant. And I love curry rice. And the reason why I love it, the first time I had it was in Japan. So that in turn brings a lot of sentimental value. I had my first curry rice in Japan and it was delicious. I've loved it ever since. My favorite food, full stop. So that's curry rice. So if I want to write about my favorite story and talk about how this favorite meal means something to me, then I'll probably only focus on the curry rice. I don't have to include every single other thing I ate that day because it's not relevant. I don't have to say I had boba tea, right? I don't have to say that. Even though it might be a data which I might just throw in, I don't want to factually state every single thing that happened on that day because it's not important to my story. I will select the things which stand out to me in that time. So remember, symbols are meant to be deliberate. Secondly, symbols, like I said before, are meant to trigger certain things. I said before that with my example of the curry rice, it triggers my memory of Japan. Okay, and certain things might trigger memories of family, of certain events, of certain embarrassments perhaps. So people are very good at putting things in context. The key is that it's about connections. So when we think about any object, how do we establish the importance of an object? How can I establish that, let's say, this particular pencil is more important than this particular pen? They're generic things. But what makes these things special is the context in which we pull them from. Maybe one pencil was a gift from a teacher from year 12 and I kept it ever since, whereas the other one I bought from Officeworks just yesterday. So we insert memory, value, feelings, emotions, importance on context. Often the symbol itself doesn't matter, but what goes on behind it is. The other thing is, many of these things don't have to be told. And that's one of the criteria we'll talk about later on. These connections are things that we make without being told to make them. So I'm not saying this pen must be connected to your past. It's like you carry it with you, but you don't need to tell people. People can kind of make the connection on their own. You show them rather than tell them, which moves to our first few points. Now, there are examples of bad symbolism, or people who don't use symbols very well. We had a funny thing yesterday with the hand sanitizer. So, like, if the symbol is too literal, as in literally, this hand sanitizer cleans germs, and therefore it shows how clean a person I am. That's lame. That's like that's like punny lame. It's not even funny anymore. So, if you are literally using things just for the sake of using the literal meaning, maybe it isn't the best symbol. It's kind of what you would use for a stand-up comedy show. You wouldn't really use as a symbolic story. It's not like this stapler represents my family and the need to stick together. That sounds lame from me. It sounds worse from you. So don't try to take things that literally. Okay, so symbols need to have a bit more nuance and subtlety to them rather than being literal objects. Likewise, if it's too contrived, or you're trying too hard to make it sound symbolic, then it's also a bit of a miss, because it's like we said before, what if the pearls or the jelly in this tea represents the sweetness of my soul inside the bitterness of the tea? That's, I mean, we get what you're trying to do. You are trying to be symbolic, but you're almost trying too hard to make something symbolic when you could have done so in a more subtle way. And subtlety is going to be something I repeat a lot in this video. Lastly, it has too many layers to dig through. So if there are too many degrees of separation between the symbol and the meaning, it makes it quite hard to join these things together. The example I used before, I'm thinking of someone in class when I'm saying this, but it's like we have all these connections in our head. And I'm using an example, let's say this pencil again. So this is a Staedtler pencil. I actually have no idea where it's made. It might be German, but point is, it's like this pencil was manufactured in Germany. Germany was a military power before World War II. Therefore, this pencil represents the might that I have compared to the propaganda of TV screens. It's like, what the hell? Like, how'd you get that all together? And I get, like, these things one at a time make sense, but when you look at the end product, you go, how'd you go from this to this? So symbols shouldn't be that complicated. They can have depth, but they don't need complexity. Next up, good symbolism. So good symbolism is based off sentimental feelings. It can be a happy memory or a unique memory or even a sad memory. So rather than a generic one, it's like how generic can it be? A rose represents love, or a love heart represents love. That's quite literal. So that's okay if you use for certain purposes. Maybe it's a love heart locket or something, but it's something which has sentimental value. So it doesn't have to be obviously a flower or a heart or a photograph. It could be something like this pencil. In fact, one of the photographs on my Facebook page, which I don't have right now, but it's a generic rainbow colored pencil. There's nothing special about the pencil itself, but it was given to me by my year 11 teacher as a farewell present. So he's been teaching for like 30 odd years, and he said that this is a magic pencil. What happens is when you use it for your year 12 exam, all you do is you close your eyes, you circle the answer, and you get it right. Now, it's absolute bullcrap, of course, but what a daggy thing to say as a teacher, right? So that worked really well. So I still have the pencil somewhere, but that's sentimental value. So that sort of thing was unique to me, which is the second point too. Often these are unique experiences. So a normal item, which to other people might be quite basic, actually has a unique significance to that particular person. It might be a book, it might be a regular object, but to you or to your character, it bears a special significance. Thirdly, good symbolism is subtle. In other words, it's not too obvious. It's like, again, we go with the winning example. You have a trophy or a medal or a gold medal, and it's like, yes, this medal represents the fact that I am a champion. That's a pretty basic symbolic connection. Okay, you're writing like grade 6 or year 7 and you're asked to use symbols. How do you show love? Love hearts. How do you show winning? Gold medals. But often you can take something a bit more deep, a bit more meaningful by looking at things which aren't as obvious. They're going for the second place medal or going for the thing where you lost. That might have more symbolic value to you than the actual thing you got at the end. Lastly, a good symbol isn't overused. Don't make symbols go right in your face. Okay, if it's going to be something you want to reinforce throughout the story, that's fine. But don't try to say, again, using our staple examples, like, and I woke up this morning and I couldn't find my stapler, and I was worried about how my family was breaking apart, and I need to keep it together, like my stapler. And the papers that I was trying to staple represent my individual family members and their differences, and they need to be kept together with a stapler. So don't keep stuffing it in my face every single time. That's not good symbolism. And in fact, some of the best symbols, they appear once, you don't see it ever again till the very end, and you go, wait, what? Oh, that's why it's there. It's like those riddles where, you know, you're told all this irrelevant information, and then you say, well, who killed that guy? And you try to go through all the clues. Do you remember in literacy we talked about the Jonah stories? That they're kind of those things where there's one hint at the beginning of the story, everyone misses it. At the end, it comes back, and we're like, oh, I knew it, of course I knew it. And that's kind of the same thing as good symbolism. You can drop it at the beginning and then bring it back at the end when people don't expect it. Which again leads us to our next point. So, using symbols in a story. Big part, firstly, show, don't tell. That is always an important part of any story writing. Don't try to explain the thing to me. Now, this again heavily hinges on your approach to the writing, on what kind of style you're looking for. If you are going for a bit more of an informative, reflective style, your character or your narrator might be using a symbol as part of making sense of things. So it makes sense to explain certain elements. But if like people don't think, again, if I'm thinking of say a very important symbol like this arrow, okay, this arrow might have sentimental value. It may be given as a prize to me by someone who passed away. Okay, that may be a symbol. This isn't. It's just one I bought. But let's say this particular one has significance. I'm not going to like think about that particular thing every single time I hold it. If I'm streaming, I'm making a video like this, and I just pick it up and I don't go, man, I really missed that guy who gave this to me. I'm not going to ponder that every single time. It comes back to you only in certain moments. So don't feel that urge to keep on explaining, oh, by the way, this arrow represents this person's soul. You don't have to do that. In fact, the more you leave to guess, the better it is. Let it show naturally through your story rather than telling us what the symbol is. Plant the symbols where it makes sense in the story, which is what I said before. Don't force it when it doesn't have to be. Make it part of the story where it would make sense. Alright, there might be no reason for me to have this arrow, but maybe I'm sitting at my desk, I'm fidgeting, I just picked it up, I'm holding it. Or maybe I'm looking for a pen, you know, I've got my pen hold over here, but instead of grabbing a pen, I grab this. I have this moment where I go, huh. So try to insert these symbols where they make the most sense in the story. Don't try to force it into your story. And a last pro tip I have is the earlier you mention this symbol, the more time you have to develop it. And this is where the first few parts of your story, your first third, the exposition, the setup is so important. You don't want to just throw the symbol at the very end and then suddenly it makes sense, alright? Sometimes you might have what's called MacGuffins in films where, you know, the characters are chasing after this object for no reason other than it's there. So it's kind of like, we need to defeat evil bad guy, and the first 2 hours of the movie are like just running around and killing bad guys, and we can't think of a way to kill a big bad guy, and suddenly we have the magic arrow, and then this symbolizes our friendship, and then we kill the guy. That's crappy symbolism, alright? If it's something like, I have this at the very beginning, but it's like this crappy mini arrow which does nothing, and then throughout the 2 hours we try everything, and then we try all these big swords and giant fireballs, but in the end we realize that we're trying to be too ambitious, and what really matters is the effort behind it. Maybe the small things in life are the best. See, that's symbolism. So by planting things earlier, you give them more time to develop. Maybe this thing is something that's a joke for the whole story, but in the end, it turns out not to be a joke. That gives us time to develop, whereas if you drop at the very end and suddenly this stapler solves all problems, that's crappy symbolism, okay? So you don't want to just throw things at the end for no reason. Plant them early, let them develop. The symbol should come back to hit us at the end. That brings me to the next point. Endings. People love and hate endings because a lot of us are good at starting stories but can't bring them to a natural end. And this ties back to what I said before about having the tendency to write factual recounts. We start things, well, from the beginning to end. We write start to finish. And that's not really the point. You almost want to think about writing a story with the ending in mind first. Like, you want to think, how would the story end rather than how the story begin? Because you always go back to the beginning. The ending is what we need to conclude. What is the moment we want to share most? So, endings tend to suck because we just finish it. We go, and then I finished my curry rice and it was delicious. So what? So how do we make ends good? Firstly, let's talk through bad endings. Bad endings don't connect to the story, okay? So the first few parts we'll put together, they don't connect the elements of the story together. They leave loose ends and they make the whole story pointless. So we come back to the whole setup and structure of the story. We spent maybe 600 words or like 2 pages describing this story. So what? The ending needs to be what ties everything together. We call things loose ends because it's like we introduce things but we leave them there. So an example of this is, let's say I go to a family gathering, typical Asian family gathering. It's a food story, and I spend like 2 paragraphs introducing 10 different relatives. So I've got, I've got Bak Hai, I've got Go Van, I've got Din Yung, I have Zhu Kung, I've got all my uncles and aunts and my cousins who are in university or in high school. I've gone through this whole list. So what? So why would I spend so much time introducing people by name if I'm never going to mention them again? Why not just call them my uncle, my aunt, or use the name once, Yivung, or whatever. So if I just have a name, it's like a passing reference. If I choose to describe a person in detail, there has to be a reason why. And that's why when you think about everything you include in your story needs to be there for a reason. Every person, every event, every object, every symbol needs to be there for a purpose. It may come back later on. If I mention my cousin Koi, who is this arrogant idiot who keeps on bragging about his high math scores, am I mentioning that for any reason? So if I just put it there, it may be there for flavor. And I'm going to make it clear here, don't skip all detail. You can have information and detail and description to make things more exciting, more colorful. But if you go overboard and there's no reason for it, especially in a short story we have limited length to work with, then you're kind of stuck with, alright, I've talked about Koi for like a page and the ending is about something else. What's the point there? If I'm going to mention my cousin Koi, then I need to go back and say, well, maybe there's an argument we have where at the end, he finds out that he didn't get into university and he becomes a much more humble person, whereas someone like me who was more humble from a poorer background got what I wanted. Maybe that's the moral. So these things are there for a reason rather than being arbitrary. So those were the three things I mentioned there. Don't leave things unconnected. If you mention something, if there's a problem, a conflict, or something else, bring it together at the end. If you introduce something, don't just leave it there. Make it conclude in some way. The more things you can bring back at the end, the more satisfying it is. If it makes the whole story pointless, if the revelation, if your epiphany, if your ending, your conclusion can be understood without reading the entire story, why would I read the whole story? Okay, don't leave your best moment at the very end. You need to build up to it. I'm going to share a bit of a story here. As an anime lover, quote unquote, okay, one of the things that we love to hate are filler episodes. We watch, not just filler, but like anything that's not a major battle, right? So if you watch like Dragon Ball or like JoJo or whatever, like we always skip towards the battles. We have like Cell versus Gohan, or we have JoJo versus Dio, and we always Google and watch these battles or games. Those are the memorable ones. The thing is that they have to be enjoyed within the context of the show or the series. So we don't really appreciate the final battle without watching everything before that. The final battle is cool, it's awesome, but we don't get the sentimental value without watching everything which happened before that. The previous battles, the previous difficulties, the previous deaths of main characters. These things will trigger these memories. We don't see that JoJo versus Dio fight as being like the best fight. The reason why it's amazing is that everyone died beforehand, right? That's the thing. Like there's a scene where one of the characters, Polnareff, he does this like stab on Dio like from behind, and it's a pretty awesome epic scene. But the reason why it's so heavy is that he thinks every single person, all his friends are dead. As a viewer, we don't realize it until we go, hang on. If you watch only that scene, we see this really cool one-man charge. But in the sequence of the story, we hit that weight where he's gonna lose anyway because he thinks everyone's dead, and he nearly gets killed. But he did it anyway. And that extra death of the thing before that cooking time, that baking time, it allows us to enjoy that last moment to its maximum. And that's why I want to think of your ending scene, your climax, your conclusion, your resolution. It needs to be well baked, all right? Not half baked, but well baked. You need to give it enough time in order to have the best taste and the best aftertaste. That's why I've included this Gordon Ramsay meme, because a raw ending is just unsatisfying. It's undercooked. It's just rushed. It doesn't have the same impact. Hope that makes sense. And there you go. That's my JoJo reference. Good endings. Talk about memes. Good endings feel good. Are there any questions? No? We'll keep on going. No. Good endings are meant to feel good. If you are just writing the ending to finish the story and don't care about it, I don't care about it. Alright? You've got to make the ending hit hard. So, like I said before, what you introduce needs to have meaning towards the end. It is a person or a place or an object or a symbol, then these things need to have meaning by the end. And sometimes they are only seen at the end. They make us go back and reread the part. We go, whoa, I missed that. Where did that come from? And try and find the part that began the story where the thing first pops up. So it's that callback. And again, good endings hit us hard in the feels. You know, a lot of our stories will be quite emotional. They talk about personal experiences, hit us hard, and finally make us think. We don't just read something and go, oh, okay, nice ending. Like even like popular movies, like we took a typical Marvel movie, right? It's an action movie, it's a superhero movie. But sometimes the messages we see in movies make us go, huh, wow, that's something I would tattoo on my shoulders. You know, that sort of thing kind of really hits us. It represents something that makes us go, that was worth it in the end. So that's what we think about when it comes to endings, all right? And that feel-good feeling. So how do we work things into, or work symbols into good endings? There are several ways in which you can use symbols effectively. There are more than this, but I'm just taking some examples which have brought up in the past. Okay, so one way to do this is to call back. So you introduce a symbol at the beginning of the story and then you bring it back at the end. So the story isn't about the symbol, but it's something we just brought at the beginning and brought back at the end. We mentioned yesterday or the other lesson, Carl's, he's into gaming because his dad's into gaming, and maybe like he in the story he talks about the PSP, the PlayStation Portable, and his first Tekken game, and in the story, in the end, he's obviously forgotten about it. He's playing other games, playing PS4. He's playing like Tekken 8 or whatever that Tekken's up to now. But while he's cleaning out, at the end, he finds his PSP. So maybe he gets bored of gaming. Maybe he doesn't find it fun anymore. But in cleaning out, he finds his first PSP, his first Tekken game. And that brings back the memory of all the games he's played. And he finds it fun again. Can you see? I mean, honestly, even just describing it, can you see how it works? I'm not saying it's easy, but it makes us go, oh, that's a good story. I would use that. Carl could hit here. But that's like the story you want to share. So it's not hard to connect these things. You just need to think about it in this way. So like I said before, one way is the callback. Something happens at the end which brings back what happened at the beginning. That's a callback. That's one being used as a symbol. Maybe again, it might be I'm using an example. I want to use this before, but this is a dictionary. Okay, this is my dad's dictionary, the first one he got when he came to Australia, and I might be looking on a bookshelf and I see this, and it has no meaning because at the time I think, oh yeah, I know what it is, but I definitely have seen this elsewhere. So I've definitely seen this particular print of dictionary in our school library. So maybe the fact that maybe the story is me going to the Braybrook Library and I find a very old dictionary. It's really old. It's kind of outdated. It's all yellowish, and to me it's like an old dictionary. Maybe I'm a student. I need to borrow a dictionary for a SAC, and this is the last one they have. And it's annoying me because I can't find a word that I need in the dictionary. So I get angry, I go home, and then when I'm at home, I talk to my dad, and dad's like, you really should have your own dictionary. And he gives me this one, the same one he had. And even though the dictionary was frustrated to me in my story, the fact that he shares a sentimental story of him coming to Australia and not knowing English and using this dictionary is a callback. And that links these things together. Why would I write about language and dictionaries, English SACs, only to mention this dictionary? Because it has a sentimental value to me later on. And I'll weave the story to include that at the end as well. So make space for it. Think about using a symbol as a climax. So maybe the symbol itself is a story, and you are using to represent something. And I've made the story up here. Imagine there's a character. I'm thinking of someone in mind here, right? So this is fictional, but it's based on a true story. So let's say we make a character up called her name is Hoa. Okay, her name is Xuân Hoa. So in Vietnamese, that's what, spring flower. So perhaps her Vietnamese name, let's call her Rose. Rose Hoa Nguyen. That's a typical Vietnamese name, alright? Pretty redundant because Rose and Hoa, Rose is a flower, Hoa means flower. But that's how we name people. So we have Rose Hoa Nguyen, but the reason why she might dislike her middle name because it sounds too Asian, but maybe it's given to her because it's her grandmother's name, so she keeps it as a middle name. And the whole point of the story is she's trying to grow a flower in her garden in order to commemorate her grandmother. But not only is she a terrible gardener and she has no idea how to grow a flower, there might be like the dog dug it up and there's a rainstorm, the thing washes away, and the whole story is about her feeling sad about not being able to commemorate her grandmother. But she realizes that she still has her memory of her grandmother in her heart, and at the very end, the rose blossoms anyway. Ouch, the feels, man, that hurts. And that's what I mean. These are great story ideas. Use this if you want. That's the idea. So we have different ways to use this. That's the climax. The whole story is about the rose trying to grow, but we go through the roller coaster of emotions. But at the end, it's the climax. It's the focal point. Lastly, there's the subversion. So it's like the bait and switch. You lead the reader into thinking one thing will happen, but something else happens. We have an example of a dog collar here, but let's play around with a different example. I love using, just to show it's not hard. I'm saying it's easy. it's not hard to come up with examples once you know how this thing works. So we talk about a subversion. So subversion, we lead people one way, but we actually twist it. It's like a twist ending. Okay, it's like let's say, let's find an object on my desk. This is the relic challenge. Okay, so let's say I have an object that is this stapler. No, I'm not gonna do that. Okay, I need something which represents. Well, my desk is crap. I didn't think about this. I didn't think this through. No, let's talk about the eraser. I don't know why I'm doing this. All right, so I'm gonna do a bait and switch. Okay, so let's say this eraser represents my paranoia in doing artwork. I do artwork, by the way, in case you didn't know. So I've never been a confident artist. So this eraser represents my lack of confidence. So maybe this whole story, actually true story, last night I was trying to draw something. I couldn't find my eraser. I just couldn't find it. And I actually can't draw anything without an eraser. I tried using the one on my pencil. These ones are crap, by the way. They just scratch the whole thing. So I need something to rub mistakes, because we make mistakes. And my symbolism is that the eraser represents my insecurity and my humanity in making mistakes. That's my symbolism. So the whole thing about me trying to find the eraser on my desk for the whole morning and being unable to proceed kind of leads you to think that I'm an insecure person. And at the end, I might decide that I can draw without the eraser. Okay, so you might think that I'm going to give up, but my subversion is, you know what, I'm going to draw a sketch without using it anyway and overcome that fear factor and overcome my insecurity. And that's how I subvert expectation. People think I'm going to find it. I'm not going to find it, but instead of giving up, I'm going to do it anyway. Even a bigger twist, I'm a digital artist. Control Z. True story too. But that's a twist ending, because you know we kind of led towards one path, but we suddenly switch towards another. It's not a complete switch where it makes no sense. It makes perfect sense, but only because we're able to control that turn. So that's a twist ending. Alright, and some tips to end up with, alright? So, like we said before, everything in your story needs to be there for a reason. If you include too many things which don't have any relevance, again, some things are good for flavor, like you don't just want to have straight story and have no extra filler. But too much filler is a bad thing, and as an anime, nobody likes fillers. Don't introduce too many things, so which you're not going to use later on. So people, symbols, dialogue. If you're going to spend time, like dialogue's a good example, because a lot of people feel obligated to include dialogue. All right, it's kind of like I went to the party and I saw my uncle, and then we had this like 3-line dialogue. Is there a reason why you even bring it up? Okay, you might just think, oh yeah, we said hi, so say hi, said Jukung. Hi, I said to my cousin. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's cool. But is there a reason why? Now, in terms of long stories, you can get away with a lot more filler and padding because you need to make it longer. But for a short story, and this is the big thing for you guys, you only have like 800 words maximum to play around with, maybe like 10%, so maybe 880 words. Any more than 900, then you're blowing it, okay? You lose marks because you've gone over the word limit. So if you are wasting time with unnecessary dialogue, what's the point? Imagine a movie where, because movies, you might not realize a good movie cuts out the boring bits. There's action scenes and there's climax scenes, but there's also character development. There's plot progression. So you have the conversation in the elevator. You have the anti-climax to lower the intensity. But these scenes are just as important, but they're there for a reason. Imagine if every single scene went through all the formalities. It's like you meet someone and you already know who they are. You don't go through the hi, I am this person, I'm from blah blah blah. It's kind of like we assume the characters know each other, so we skip all the boring bits. So as a challenge for you writing your short story, you should be thinking like, drop us right in the story and make us figure it out. Make us go, well, who's this person? The way you're talking to this person means that they're probably family and probably older. Don't try to just chuck in dialogue because it's like there for no reason. So point being is there should be things there for purpose. If you're not going to pull it back later on, is there a reason why you're using it? My last tip for you is, if you write about a real experience, don't include every single thing because it happened. Like I said at the very beginning, be selective in choosing the things that you want to include. The things you choose to include should lead towards the ending that you want to share. So that's my advice and my tips for you in writing your creative pieces. This is where I think we separate the good stories from the great stories. The great stories make us go, ooh, damn, that's like a mic drop right there, right? That's kind of like we didn't expect that, and bang, it hits us. Whereas good stories may be well written, but the endings are predictable. I've said before, typical Asian story. Yes, my mum escaped on a boat and they came to Australia and had a hard time. They couldn't speak English, so she opened up a fish and chip shop, and now she has 3 kids, and my older brother's in university, and my younger sister's in grade 5, and I'm in year 12, and I'm working very hard now, and we're very happy. That's like everyone's story, right? So there's no satisfaction. It might be well written, it might be very emotional, but it's like a summary of your life, and that doesn't always make a good story. So by transforming things, inserting symbols in the story, by twisting the ending around, by choosing things more carefully, you can make a good story great. It's not easy. I'm not going to say like everyone can do this and it'd be really, really easy to get A+. It's not easy. It's also not hard. And what I need you to think about is try to think more strategically about what hits hardest in your story. Don't just write the story out start to finish, but think about which parts hit the most. Hope that helps. Good luck with your story, and I'll see you next time.